So we're going to have all of those things and more. But right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Curtis Kalin, who serves as the communications director and spokesman for Citizens Against Government Waste, a private, nonpartisan nonprofit organization representing more than 1 million members and supporters nationwide. Prior to joining CAGW in March of 2015, Curtis worked as communications director for CNS News, a division of the Media Research Center, and as comms associate for the National Taxpayers Union. Curtis was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, before attending George Mason University in 2009 and graduating with a BA in political communications in 2013. He's a news junkie, sports fan, diehard supporter of the Cards and the Blues. His Twitter handle is Curtis Kalin. Curtis, thank you so much for coming on today.
Well, I appreciate being on, Stacy. Thanks so much.
Yeah, so let's talk about your new report that you have out. I read it with interest.
Oh, yeah, it's fantastic. It's called Prime Cuts 2017, and it's a funny thing. Every time I would tell anybody that I work for a government waste organization, one of the first questions you normally hear is very basic, which is, how much waste is there, really? You know, can you total it up? Can you give me a number? How many things? And that's a very, very difficult thing to do. And so Prime Cuts is what Citizens Against Government Waste does once a year. It's an annual report that basically tries to do just that. It tries to find, as expansive as you can, how many programs in the federal government engage in waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement. And so this year's report found 607 recommendations to do things in certain federal programs, all bipartisan or nonpartisan sources. If all of those recommendations were done and achieved, you would see $336 billion saved for taxpayers in 1 year, 1 year alone, $2.3 trillion over 5 years. And so basically those numbers effectively add up to, you could, if you did all these recommendations, you achieved them, you could balance the federal budget within 3 years, so before President Trump's first term is up.
It's pretty amazing, but what's the likelihood of us getting some of these things done? I've read through the list. I shared it with the listeners on the program a couple days ago. I'm so excited about the list that you don't have to convince me, Curtis. I'm with you.
Sure.
I'm right behind you. I support your organization. I think you guys do better than fantastic work. Whatever superlative comes above fantastic, that's what you guys do. I thought the suggestions in your report, Prime Cuts, were, to me, kind of perfect because I prefer to talk about how much money we save if we take the USAID money of $610 million a year that goes to family planning, quote unquote. You know, I'm a partisan. I'm on the right. I want to see Planned Parenthood defunded. I want to see a lot of consolidation on some of the things that these are social issue type things. I want to see more welfare reform, closing down the border, eliminating all these programs for people who are here illegally. But your Prime Cuts don't really go into the partisan neighborhoods. You just tackle the stuff that most Americans can agree these are not prudent ways to spend tax dollars.
You bet. And that's, I think, a key point, especially, is that regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, we source all this stuff, these 607 recommendations. They're all sourced somehow in a bipartisan way or a nonpartisan way. So like a GAO, Government Accountability Office, a CBO, Congressional Budget Office, federal budgets under Obama, under Trump, under even Bush, going back to Bush or Clinton, where it basically, you could go up to anybody and say, all right, so you could agree that if this program agreed to be cut under Obama and Trump, if they both agree, which is not very, very rarely do they agree, and so if that little sliver where they agree on this program, we should be able to agree that it should be cut. And I'm talking about not just cutting their budget. I mean eliminating the program straight away, because a lot of times you see budgets fall and go up and down, and you never get rid of it. The key here is to get rid of this stuff permanently.
So let's talk a little bit about the ones that could be done with little or no, horrifying resistance. Is it that we have to vote on these things individually, or are these items that could just be kind of deleted, right? Deleted from the line items, and then you come in with the budget without those things?
Well, yeah, most of the time, these cuts will be done in the budget process. So when someone passes, if they ever do pass a budget on time up here in D.C., that basically you would see which is, by the way, President Trump's budget does, his first one, for fiscal year 18, basically takes a program and zeroes it out, goes from whatever their budget is to zero. And so, for example, one of those things that has agreement, as I mentioned before, is the community development block grants. These are things that get block granted to certain cities and localities. A lot of them, by the way, are in very, very rich, wealthy areas, which don't really need additional taxpayer funding. President Obama's budget back in, I think, 2012 said that they couldn't demonstrate outcomes and measure or evaluate the outcomes of these grants. So the taxpayer money is flowing, and there's no way to know whether it's working or it's not working. And he said we should dramatically cut this program. Trump's budget actually eliminates this program. And so by doing that, you would save $3.2 billion in just 1 year alone, just by doing that.
So $3.2 billion, which sounds like a ton of money to us regular folks. Anyone who operates in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, the billion is way outside of our normal realm of what we, the scope. But how do we get to, so I'm just going down one of the short lists that you sent over from Prime Cuts. Sure. The billions of dollars, so you're talking about $336 billion. And if they could take all of your recommendations, then you would see savings in the billions or trillions?
If you were to take all of our Prime Cuts recommendations, you'd see $2.3 trillion over 5 years. That would be the total.
So we have a yearly deficit of 600 and some odd billion, 675, 695, something like that. That's every year we spend that much more than what we bring in. So when you add these savings in, you're saying in 3.5 years, then we'd have a balanced budget where we wouldn't have that 600 and some odd $billion in deficit every year.
That is correct. 100% right.
Okay. All right. So, and I'm recapping that for people because, again, the numbers are not like we just don't sit around the table and say, so how many billions of dollars can we save on our grocery bill? It's just, these are just not things that we deal with, these kinds of numbers. Even CEOs of normal sized businesses often don't deal with billions of dollars in revenue or budgets or anything like that. I'm on your sheet now. The CBO estimates the fiscal year 2017 budget deficit will be $693 billion. So almost $700 billion. And so what are your thoughts on whether or not this actually gets done? I love these suggestions, but what happens now?
Well, basically, I've been telling everybody this is a question I get all the time as well, which is the political likelihood of this kind of thing, and the tough reality is that it's always difficult. The hardest thing I've found in D.C. ever is to eliminate a government program. I think Reagan used to say a government program is the closest thing that we have to eternal life. It just never gets taken away. And so a lot of this stuff has to come on two ends of the spectrum. One, you need presidential leadership. And so it's something that on this particular area, President Trump has been very good about. He's taken his business acumen and put it to work in this term on terms of this budget. His first budget was very bold, very expansive in this area. But on the other end of it, Congress has to do their job. And that's where you kind of have a bottom-up approach. That's the only way this is going to work, is where taxpayers put the pressure on their legislators, and there's really no other way to do it. It's got to be bottom-up because there are just unbelievable amount of special interests up here that will talk to them from back home. For example, we have like sugar subsidies. Well, the people in Florida, even Republicans in Florida who are fiscal conservatives, will have this whispered in their ear. There will be businesses saying, "Oh my gosh, we need this corporate welfare. We have to keep this program." And there's got to be a stronger voice, a louder voice from their constituency. That's the only way this is going to happen.
Okay. I think we have strong voices on a lot of different issues, but we've been pretty strong on reducing the size of government and lowering spending for how many years now? Since the inception of the Tea Party in 2009. And we've seen some weird things happen. Sequestration, which was a horrible, horrible way to bring down the budget. not very smart. We've seen things like that, but we've not seen the kind of cuts that we saw Mitch Daniels make in his state when he was governor, or Governor Walker make in his state, where they kind of go through and they literally take a paper copy of the budget and they just spend hours poring over it, redlining things, and then they go back in and they actually cut the things they redlined. We just haven't seen that at the national level.
That is true, and that's something that is extremely disappointing, obviously. But again, I go back to, and perhaps it's more than just being generic. Maybe it's easier in a state where there's the budget generally is a little less. But up here in D.C., you have so much more money, so many more interests, flying around. You have billions and trillions of dollars instead of in the hundreds of tens of millions in a state. Also, I think perhaps also there isn't this laser focus on certain big ticket items. There's always a general, well, we need to cut, randomly. And that's one thing Prime Cuts, I think, is perfect for, is that you can go through there and you can search by amount of money. So, I mean, assuming that Congress doesn't do every single one of these 607 things, you could say, all right, well, at least this will save X billion here, and if you channel all your energy on this program or that program where they will save the most money in the quickest way possible, I think that's another potential strategy.
All right. Well, I have to say, I'm so pleased that you guys do this, that you take the time to run through the budgets. It's not easy work. It's not fun work. It's not the kind of stuff that gets you lots of positive press for doing it. But in the eyes of tax-paying Americans like myself, you have on a cape. You're a hero for taking this task on and constantly pounding the pavement, saying, "Look, this is what we can do. Look, this is what we can cut. Look, the government still works. The lights are still on if we cut these things." And I think that's what's so interesting about the suggestions that you've made. None of them really impact any one large group of Americans in such a way that it would be news. Cutting these things wouldn't even be a blip on the screen on the lives of Americans. And it certainly wouldn't be a bad thing. It would actually be of benefit to us. And we've got to stop this ship. It's going in the wrong direction. I'll give you the last word. We have about 30 seconds.
Well, sure, and I completely agree with it, and we all appreciate the support of taxpayers all across the country. But I think it's just I know sometimes it can get really bleak up here, but I think using things like Prime Cuts, using things like we also have the Pig Book, things like that at CAGW, and inform yourself and get involved in the process. You can't be a bystander here. You have to do that. So I would encourage all of your listeners to go to cagw.org/Prime Cuts. That's where you can read our summary. There's a couple infographics up there that will help you digest the information. And so just take that stuff and get involved. All
right, we will do. And at Curtis Kalin on Twitter. Thank you so much,
That's
Curtis,
true.
for coming on today. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I hope to talk to you again soon.